Let's talk Tanya for the 24th of Iyar of a leap year. So we're in the home stretch of Tanya. We have 3 chapters left for Likutei Amarim. We just finished a series of chapters, beginning with chapter 38, and that took us all the way through chapter 50, which spoke about kavana. Kavana meaning the intent in doing a mitzvah. Intent being the motivation for doing a mitzvah, which, as we explained, the proper motivation for doing a mitzvah is love and awe for Hashem. That's those are the chapters that we just concluded. Today, we're starting the last 3 chapters as mentioned, and these 3 chapters take us back to something we spoke about earlier. In chapters 35 through chapters 37, there we spoke about the idea of how our action mitzvahs create a dir b'tachtonim, create a dwelling place for God over here in this world, and over there we spoke about it somewhat at length. These last 3 chapters of Tanya are going to go a little deeper into that concept and explain at an even deeper level how and why it is that our action mitzvahs are instrumental in creating this home for God. But the first thing is the Alter Rebbe is going to take us back to a metaphor from the Zohar, which the Alter Rebbe introduced in the beginning of chapter 35. The metaphor is that our bodies, we are compared to a candle, and our bodies are the wick. There is the fire above our heads, that is the Shechinah, the divine presence. And what keeps the wick connected to the fire? For that we need oil. And the oil, the Zohar tells us, the oil are the uvdan tavan, the good deeds, the action mitzvahs that we do. So as it turns out that what makes the dir b'tachtonim, what causes the resting or the indwelling of the divine presence upon our bodies and the entire world, that is action mitzvahs. And the question the Alter Rebbe says is, why oil? Why are action mitzvahs compared to oil? What is the comparison between the two of them? And especially since, for those of you who are more knowledgeable in Kabbalah or Chassidus, we know that oil usually is a metaphor for chachma, for wisdom. But over here we see that we're talking about action mitzvahs and referring to it as oil. What's the connection? So the answer to this, we're not going to get until the end of chapter 53. But first, let's talk a little about the idea of Hashras Shechinah in general. Hashras Shechinah, as we just explained, is the resting of the divine presence in a certain place. For example, the ultimate resting of the Shechinah was in the holy temple, and that makes a place holy. And now we take that for granted that certain places are holier than others. The holy temple was and is a holy place. Hashul is a holy place. But really the question is, what makes one place holier than the next? We know that God is equally present everywhere. So if God is equally present everywhere, then it would seem that every place is equally holy. And if you're going to say the only difference is in terms of revelation, so then really every place also is equally holy. The question is only how much the holiness is revealed in a certain place. Is that really all it's about? Is not essential holiness, but the revelation? And the answer we'll find out is no. There's actually something very different about a place like the Beis HaMikdash. And what is that? So to understand that, we need to first examine the relationship between our bodies and our souls. And the reason for that is, the Pasuk says, Mi b'sari echza alika, that we can look at ourselves and catch a glimpse of God, because God created us in His image. So there are a lot of understandings that we can have about God simply by looking at ourselves and seeing how we function. And more specifically, the interplay between our body and our soul, the relationship between the two of them, mirrors the relationship between God and the world. So therefore, understanding ourselves better will give us understanding also of the idea, the concept of the dwelling of the Shechinah, or what a holy place means. So when we look at ourselves, we know that we have a body, we have a soul. Where in the body is the soul? Is the soul more in one part of the body than the other? So at first glance, it would seem that yes. For example, take the brain. The brain is the nerve center of the body, and all the energy, the life force for the entire body comes from the brain. So it would seem that the soul is more present in the brain. On the other hand, the body, every single part of the body is equally alive. Would you say that the brain is more alive than your little toe? No. So is the soul present everywhere equally or not? So Alter Rebbe explains, the answer is, it depends which part or which level of the soul you're talking about. Because there are 3 different stages in the soul and its relationship with the body. The first stage is the soul on its own. You might want to say the core of the soul, the essence of the soul. The essence of the soul is what is known in Hebrew as pashut. Pashut means simple. What do I mean by simple? It's not a compound entity. It's not composed of different faculties and energies and powers. Rather, it is something from which all of the faculties and the energies of the soul emerge, but it itself is an absolute simple unity. From this essence of the soul, which is again stage 1, comes out a whole package, a suite of different faculties and energies and powers, and that enters the brain. And that's why the brain is the nerve center of the body. and that is only in the brain. And then from the brain, you have different strands of energy that come out, and therefore the faculty of seeing enters the eye, and the faculty of hearing enters the ear, etc., etc. So we have, again, the essence of the soul, which is pashut, which is simple, not a composite. And then we have in the brain, we have in a very condensed, concentrated way, we have all of the faculties and powers of the entire body. That that energy from the soul enters the brain, and that every single limb has only a very specific energy, which comes from the brain for which enables it to fulfill its particular function. Now, the essence of the soul is equally present in the entire body, which is why every part of the body is equally alive. At the same time, you can't compare the brain with the rest of the body, because the brain has the nerve center, the brain has that entire package of energy which emanates from the essence of the soul, whereas every single limb of the body only has one particular energy or faculty. How does this play out in terms of the relationship between God and creation? That we will discuss in the coming days of Let's Talk Tanya.